By now, I think most people know about The Wizard of Oz. Even if you haven't seen the movie itself, you've at least heard of the ruby slippers in the Emerald City. Whether it was through the Muppets or one of many Family Guy cutaway gags, it's pretty hard to avoid. But aside from spoofs and parodies, which there are plenty of, The Wizard of Oz's cinematic legacy has thrived for decades, and oftentimes in some of the last places you'd expect. The movie's plot is simple. Dorothy is from Kansas, she's whisked away to the magical land of Oz, where she meets an ensemble of increasingly weird characters. She kills the Wicked Witch, back to Kansas, happy ending, boom, bam, done.
That's world record, dude!
Such a simple plot is perfectly ripe for parody and pastiche, and some of our greatest filmmakers and showrunners have tapped in and made their own versions of the 1939 classic. Sure, their love letters to the Wizard of Oz might not feature an Emerald City or flying monkeys, but there are some consistencies. So let's make a set of guidelines, shall we? Number 1. Our protagonist finds themselves in an unfamiliar world. Number 2. They meet a bizarre cast of characters on their journey back home. Number 3. A return home. Now, obviously there are plenty of movies with references and odes to the Wizard of Oz, but for this video I'm more focused on the structure of the plot itself. So let's get started. Miyazaki's latest is, it's another masterpiece. I've seen it twice in theaters now, and it feels so familiar yet so fresh. A perfect coexistence between The Wind Rises and his earlier works of fantasy like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. The idea of one of Miyazaki's protagonists being taken on a journey in a different world isn't necessarily a new one, but the reason I chose The Boy and the Heron over some of his others is because the characters he met on his adventure were familiar ones. In this land, where bending the rules of time is as easy as turning a doorknob, Mahito meets younger versions of some very important figures in his life. As he returns home through his own door, these characters are where they should be in terms of time and in terms of space, for better and for worse. This entire part of The Boy and the Heron story, and especially its finale, very much carries the same air as Dorothy's reunion with Hunk, Hickory, and Zeke during The Wizard of Oz's finale, with the Farmer's Oz parallels being Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Even in Oz, they were by her side, just as Himi and Kiriko were for Mahito. I think a lot of The Boy and the Heron could simply be explained using this line from The Wizard of Oz.
But it wasn't a dream. It was a place. And you were there.
Oh.
Martin Scorsese's The Wizard of Oz comes in the form of his 1985 thriller comedy After Hours. If I were to make a Scorsese ranking, After Hours is easily coming in at top 3. It's Marty on a smaller budget, running around Manhattan with a camera, and of course it's great. Between the ensemble cast and Howard Shore's exhilarating score, it's hard not to love this one. But back to Oz. We're introduced to our boy Paul Hackett, working at his desk job, just another cog in the machine and tired of the mundanity of it all. But where Dorothy was transported to Oz via Twister, Paul's gateway to the uncanny side of New York City comes in the form of his taxi ride. The scene's quick editing and intoxicating sound design aren't far off from the Twister in Kansas and end with the same silence. Scorsese does a great job at making the dark, abandoned city streets feel ominous and otherworldly, and as the film progresses, it gets continually weirder. As the night goes on, Paul meets a handful of women, one unintentionally leading him to the next, until the whole thing culminates in an angry mob wanting nothing more than to tear him apart. Paul ends where he started, back at his desk and back to his agonizing sense of normalcy. Other than the more obvious Wizard of Oz reference that might have been a wink-wink, nod-nod to the fact that this movie is heavily inspired.
Actually, he was particularly obsessed with one movie, The Wizard of Oz.
I think After Hours does a great job of capturing an otherworldly dimension without ever leaving the confines of the city streets, which is no easy feat. AI is a weird movie, and anyone who's seen it knows that, but I also kinda love it. It was Stanley Kubrick who was originally in line to make the film, but being worried that the technology wasn't ready for the scale of the story, he was never able to. By the time computer-generated effects were becoming mainstream in a post-Jurassic Park landscape, Kubrick was already at work on Eyes Wide Shut and would die shortly after the film's completion in 1999.
We begin tonight with the passing of one of the century's most provocative filmmakers.
Flash forward to 2001, and who else but Steven Spielberg would get to work on AI, combining Kubrick's sketches and notes with his own. The film follows David, a lifelike robot, as he tries to find his true place in the world, a world populated by humans and artificially intelligent cyborgs like himself. This movie is very much a modern take on Pinocchio, but I couldn't help but sense some similarities with the merry old land of Oz, between the colorful set design, the prophetic floating head, and the Good Witch. All David wants is to find a way home, and in the end he does, if only just for one day. Like After Hours, I don't think the ending of AI is necessarily a happy one, but Spielberg was still able to squeeze in his trademark sentimentality and hopefulness. I really do think this movie is great. It's a little messy, sure, but I still can't recommend this one enough. Obviously, there are plenty more movies akin to The Wizard of Oz in spirit. You could make the argument for Barbie, Over the Garden Wall, probably most David Lynch films according to David Lynch. The point is that The Wizard of Oz has stuck around for a long time, in different shapes and sizes, sure, but its legacy survives. I grew up watching this movie, and seeing its influence in movies that are still coming out today is pretty special. Thanks for watching.